The deadbolt clicked from inside our apartment at 11:47 p.m., and I knew my life was about to get interesting. Not good interesting. The kind of interesting that makes you question every decision you've ever made, starting with why you thought trusting someone with your heart was a smart move. I was lying in bed, pretending to sleep, when I heard Lena's voice mixing with her best friend Monica's in the kitchen. Monica had this way of speaking that made everything sound like a conspiracy, and tonight was no different. "You deserve a man who actually worships you, Lena. Troy treats you like a goddess. Nick's just there." Monica's voice carried that particular brand of venom that comes from someone who's never been happy and needs everyone else to be equally miserable. I'd known Monica for 3 years, ever since she'd attached herself to Lena like some kind of toxic parasite, and I'd never once seen her give advice that didn't involve burning something down. "I know," Lena whispered back, but her voice wasn't as quiet as she thought. "Troy makes me feel alive. When he touches me, it's like electricity. Nick hasn't made me feel anything in months." The rubber wheels of someone's moving dolly squeaked in the hallway outside. Probably the Johnsons finally getting out of 4B, lucky bastards. I stayed perfectly still, listening to my wife of 4 years discuss my intimate inadequacies with a woman who'd been married 3 times and was currently working on destroying her 4th relationship. The irony wasn't lost on me, but then again, irony had become the dominant theme of my life lately. "Troy's moving in this weekend," Lena continued. "I just need to figure out how to get Nick out without a huge scene." "Just tell him," Monica said, and I could practically hear her shrugging. "You're an adult. You don't need his permission to be happy." That's when I heard the sound that would haunt me for weeks afterward. The slow, deliberate sound of Lena sliding the deadbolt closed behind Monica. It was the sound of a woman who'd made up her mind, who was done pretending, who was ready to blow up everything we'd built together. I lay there in our bed, my bed technically, since my name was the only one on the deed, and waited for the show to begin. Lena padded into the bedroom at 12:15 a.m. She didn't try to be quiet. She flicked on the overhead light and stood at the foot of the bed with her arms crossed, looking like she was about to deliver a performance she'd been rehearsing. "Nick, wake up." I opened my eyes and gave her my best confused husband look. "What's wrong, babe?" "We need to talk." I sat up, rubbing my eyes. Lena looked good. She always looked good. 5'6", blonde hair that cost more to maintain than my car payment, and the kind of body that came from spending 3 hours a day at the upscale gym where she worked as an HR manager. She was wearing the black silk pajamas I'd bought her for Christmas, which felt like a particularly cruel touch. "Okay," I said. "What's on your mind?" "I want you out in 48 hours. Just like that. No preamble, no explanation, no attempt to soften the blow. Just a simple declarative sentence that was supposed to rearrange my entire existence. "I'm sorry, what?" "Troy's moving in. You're not on the lease anymore. You can stay at your sister's." I blinked at her, letting the words sink in. Troy was her trainer at the gym, 6'2", muscles in places I didn't know muscles could exist, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having been told no by anyone who mattered. He had 50,000 Instagram followers and a smile that could sell protein powder to vegans. "Should I pack Troy's protein powder?" I asked. "Or just leave it on the counter?" Lena's face flushed. "Don't be an asshole about this, Nick. I'm trying to understand the logistics here. Are we talking about a temporary arrangement, or should I start forwarding my mail? This isn't a joke." "You're right," I said, sitting up straighter. "It's not a joke. It's my life you're rearranging on 48 hours' notice, so forgive me if I'm not handling it with the appropriate gravity." Lena sat down on the edge of the bed, and for a moment I thought she might actually try to explain herself. Instead, she launched into what sounded like a prepared speech. "Troy is better than you in every way, Nick. He's stronger. He's more ambitious. He's better in bed. He makes me feel things you never could. I'm not getting any younger, and I refuse to waste any more time pretending to be happy with someone who doesn't appreciate me. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my expression neutral. I'd learned a long time ago that the best way to handle Lena when she was in full attack mode was to stay calm and let her hang herself with her own rope. Better in every way, I repeated. That's quite a comprehensive evaluation. Did you use a scoring system, or was it more of a gut feeling? You're impossible, she snapped. This is exactly why this isn't working. You can't take anything seriously. I'm taking this very seriously. I'm just trying to understand the timeline. When exactly did you and Troy start comparing notes about my performance? Lena stood up abruptly. I'm not doing this with you. I've made my decision. You have 48 hours to pack your things and get out. Troy's lease is up at his place and he's moving in here this weekend. His lease is up, I said slowly. How convenient. And I suppose he's expecting to take over my half of the rent. He shouldn't have to pay rent. I've been living here for 4 years. This is my home too. Your home, I repeated. Right. The home you've been sharing with Troy while I was traveling for work. Lena went very still. What's that supposed to mean? Nothing, I said, lying back down and pulling the covers up. Just thinking out loud. 48 hours, you said? Yes. Okay then, I guess I better start packing. Lena stared at me for a long moment, probably expecting more of a fight. When I didn't give her one, she turned off the light and walked out of the room. I heard her settle onto the couch in the living room, and I lay there in the dark, listening to the sounds of my marriage ending. But here's the thing about me that Lena never understood. I don't get mad. I get methodical. I woke up at 6 a.m., which was normal for me, and started my day like nothing had changed. Coffee, shower, the usual routine. Lena was still asleep on the couch when I left for work, curled up under the throw blanket her mother had given us for our 2nd anniversary. My job as an IT systems analyst for a mid-sized insurance company wasn't glamorous, but it had taught me a few useful skills over the years. The most important one was documentation. When you're troubleshooting a network problem, you document everything, every setting, every configuration, every change. You take screenshots, you make notes, you create a paper trail that can't be argued with later. So that's exactly what I did when I came home for lunch. Lena was at work, pulling her usual Tuesday shift at Pinnacle Fitness, the upscale gym chain where she'd met Troy. I had the apartment to myself, and I used every minute of it. I started with photographs, every room, every angle, every piece of furniture. I documented the condition of everything, the scratch on the coffee table from when Lena had moved it without lifting it properly, the wine stain on the carpet that she'd tried to hide with a strategically placed throw pillow, the dent in the bedroom wall from where she'd slammed the door during an argument 6 months ago. Then I moved on to the more interesting stuff. Lena had always been careless with her belongings, leaving things scattered around the apartment like breadcrumbs marking her territory. But now, I was looking at those belongings with fresh eyes, and I was seeing patterns I'd missed before. The designer handbag on the kitchen counter, a Coach bag that cost more than I made in a week, had a receipt tucked inside. Purchased 3 months ago, paid for with the joint credit card. The same day I'd been in Chicago for a work conference. The expensive workout clothes draped over the bedroom chair were new too. Lululemon, tags removed but the creases still visible from the packaging. Another joint credit card purchase. Another day when I'd been traveling. I photographed everything, including the receipts, and uploaded them to a cloud storage account that Lena didn't know about. Then I moved on to the really interesting stuff. Our home network showed connection logs for every device that had ever joined it. My laptop, Lena's phone, my tablet, the smart TV, the gaming console. But there were other devices too. Devices that had been connecting regularly for months, always during the day, always when I was supposed to be at work or traveling. Troy's iPhone, Troy's MacBook, Troy's Apple Watch. The connection logs painted a clear picture. Troy had been spending time in our apartment, my apartment, since at least February. Long afternoons, occasional overnight stays, weekend visits when I'd been visiting my sister in Milwaukee. I printed out 3 months' worth of logs and tucked them into a folder. Then I did something that would have made my old IT security instructor proud. I changed all the network passwords and enabled detailed logging for every device. From now on, I'd know exactly when Troy was in my home and for how long. But the real revelation came when I was packing my clothes. I was pulling shirts out of the closet when I noticed something odd. The empty space where my clothes had been was smaller than it should have been. Someone else's clothes were taking up room in my closet. Men's clothes that weren't mine. I pushed aside my remaining shirts and found them. 3 expensive workout shirts, 2 pairs of designer jeans, and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. All in Troy's size, all hanging in my closet like they belonged there. The brass closet rod echoed slightly when I moved the hangers, a hollow sound that seemed to mock everything I thought I knew about my marriage. I left Troy's clothes exactly where they were and photographed them from every angle. Then I continued packing my own things, methodically folding each item and placing it in boxes I'd picked up from the office supply store. Lena came home at 6 p.m., looking flushed and energetic in the way she always did after spending 8 hours at the gym. She found me in the bedroom, surrounded by half-packed boxes. "Oh," she said, stopping in the doorway. "You're actually doing it." "You gave me 48 hours, I said, without looking up from the shirt I was folding. I figured I'd get a head start. She walked over to the dresser and started removing her jewelry, the same routine she'd followed for 4 years. "Where are you going to go?" "I'll figure something out." "Nick." She paused, and for a moment, I thought she might actually apologize. "I know this is hard, but it's better this way. For both of us." "Better," I repeated, placing the folded shirt in the box. "Right, better in every way." Lena's reflection in the dresser mirror went red. "I didn't mean for you to hear that. But you meant it." "Yes," she said quietly. "I meant it." I nodded and continued packing. "Good to know where I stand." "You don't understand," Lena said, turning around to face me. "Troy makes me feel alive. When I'm with him, I remember who I used to be before. Before all this." She gestured around the room at the life we'd built together, like it was some kind of prison she'd been trapped in. "Before all this," I said. "You mean before the apartment I bought, the furniture I paid for, the vacations I planned, the life I built for us?" "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean, Lena? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're saying that everything we've had together for 4 years was just you settling for less than you deserved." She was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe it was." I stopped packing and looked at her directly for the first time since she'd walked into the room. "Okay then. I guess that settles it." "Nick, It's fine," I said, turning back to my packing. "Really, you've made your position clear. Troy's better than me in every way. This apartment is your home, and I'm just an obstacle to your happiness. Message received." Lena stood there for another minute, maybe waiting for me to fight for her, to beg her to reconsider, to make some grand gesture that would prove I was worth keeping around. When I didn't, she sighed and walked out of the room. I heard her on the phone a few minutes later talking to Monica in the living room. "He's taking it better than I expected," she said. "I thought he'd make a scene, but he's just packing." "That's good, right?" Monica's voice was tinny through the phone speaker. "I guess. It's just weird how calm he is. Maybe he knows you're right. Maybe he knows Troy's better for you. Maybe." I smiled as I folded another shirt. If Lena wanted calm, I'd give her calm. Right up until the moment I didn't. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I called in sick to work. It wasn't entirely a lie. I was sick, just not in the way my boss would understand. I was sick of being played for a fool, sick of being the last to know what was happening in my own life, and sick of letting other people write the story of my marriage. Lena left for work at her usual time, 7:30 a.m., kissing me on the cheek like nothing had changed. "Feel better," she said, and I almost believed she meant it. I waited 30 minutes after she left, then I got to work. The first thing I did was dig out the property deed from the filing cabinet in our home office. My home office, I corrected myself. The deed was exactly as I remembered it. Nicholas James Patterson, sole owner, purchased December 15, 2019, with funds from my father's life insurance policy. Lena had never contributed a penny to the down payment, the mortgage, or any of the major expenses. She'd moved in 6 months after I bought the place, bringing her clothes and her attitude and the assumption that what was mine was automatically ours. I photographed every page of the deed and uploaded them to my cloud storage. Then, I called the county recorder's office and requested certified copies, just in case. Next, I went through our joint finances with the kind of attention I usually reserved for debugging network problems. What I found was enlightening. In the past 6 months, Lena had spent $12,000 on clothes, $8,000 on spa treatments and salon visits, $3,000 on expensive dinners at restaurants I'd never been to, and another $5,000 on what the credit card statements euphemistically called miscellaneous purchases. $28,000 in 6 months, all of it charged to accounts that I paid for with my salary. Meanwhile, Lena's contribution to our household expenses had steadily decreased over the same period. She was making $45,000 a year at the gym, but somehow never seemed to have money for groceries or utilities or any of the mundane expenses that kept our life running. I printed out 6 months' worth of credit card and bank statements and added them to my growing file. Then I turned my attention to something more interesting: the utility bills. Our apartment was all electric, which meant every device that used power left a digital footprint. The smart meter recorded usage patterns down to the hour, and I'd been tracking our consumption for years as part of a half-hearted attempt to reduce our carbon footprint. What I found in the data made my blood run cold. On days when I was traveling for work, our electricity usage spiked dramatically. Not just a little, we're talking about consumption patterns that suggested someone was running the air conditioning, the entertainment system, the kitchen appliances, and the washer and dryer simultaneously, for hours at a time. The pattern was consistent and unmistakable. Every time I left town, someone was living in my apartment like they owned the place. I cross-referenced the utility data with my travel schedule and Lena's work schedule. The results were damning. The highest usage days corresponded exactly with my business trips, and the peak hours were times when Lena was supposed to be at work. Either my wife had developed a sudden need to do laundry and cook elaborate meals in the middle of her workday, or someone else had been making themselves at home in my absence. I was printing out the utility reports when I heard a key in the front door. It was 10:30 a.m. Lena wasn't supposed to be home for another 8 hours. I quickly shoved the papers into my folder and closed the laptop, then grabbed a box of tissues and tried to look appropriately sick. The front door opened, and I heard voices, Lena's voice and a deeper male voice that I recognized immediately. Troy. "Just need to grab a few things," Lena was saying. "Nick's home sick, so we need to be quiet." "No problem," Troy replied, and I could hear the smirk in his voice. "Wouldn't want to disturb the patient." I crept to the bedroom door and peered through the crack. Lena was leading Troy toward the kitchen, both of them moving with the casual familiarity of people who'd done this many times before. Troy was wearing gym clothes and carrying a protein shake, looking like he'd just finished a workout. "Coffee?" Lena asked, and Troy nodded. I watched my wife make coffee for her lover in my kitchen, using the expensive espresso machine I'd bought her for her birthday. They moved around each other with practiced ease, Troy reaching around Lena to grab mugs from the cabinet, Lena leaning into him as she waited for the machine to heat up. "How's he taking it?" Troy asked, settling onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. "Better than I expected. He's just packing, like it doesn't even matter to him." "Maybe it doesn't," Troy said, accepting the coffee mug from Lena. Maybe he's ready to move on too. Maybe. Troy pulled Lena between his knees and kissed her neck. Don't worry about it, babe. By this weekend it'll just be us. No more sneaking around, no more pretending. Just you and me in our place. Our place. I gripped the door frame so hard my knuckles went white. I still feel bad, Lena said, but she wasn't pulling away from Troy's touch. 4 years is a long time. 4 years of settling for less than you deserve, Troy said, his hands moving to her waist. You said it yourself. I'm better than him in every way. Stronger, more successful, better in bed. Troy, Lena laughed, but it was the kind of laugh that encouraged rather than discouraged. It's true, isn't it? When's the last time he made you feel the way I make you feel? Instead of answering, Lena kissed him. Right there in my kitchen, pressed against my counter, she kissed another man like her husband was nothing more than an inconvenient roommate who'd be gone soon. I watched for another 30 seconds, documenting every detail, every gesture, every casual intimacy that proved this wasn't a new development. Then I quietly closed the bedroom door and sat down on the bed. They stayed for another hour. I heard them moving around the apartment, heard the shower running, heard them laughing about something in the living room. At one point, Troy's voice carried clearly through the thin walls. I can't wait to get rid of that ugly couch. We'll get something that actually matches. The ugly couch was a family heirloom from my grandmother. Lena knew that. When they finally left, I waited another 30 minutes before emerging from the bedroom. The apartment smelled like Troy's cologne and Lena's perfume, a combination that made my stomach turn. I walked through every room, documenting what they'd done. The bed had been made, but not the way Lena usually made it. There were 2 coffee mugs in the dishwasher that hadn't been there when Lena left for work. The shower was still damp, and there were 2 towels in the hamper instead of 1. But the most damning evidence was in the bedroom closet. Troy's clothes, the ones I'd discovered the day before, were gone. He'd come to collect his things, the belongings he'd been storing in my home, like he already lived there. I sat down at my laptop and opened a new document. At the top, I typed, "Timeline of deception." Then I started writing down everything I'd observed, every piece of evidence I'd collected, every lie I'd been told. By the time I was finished, I had a 15-page document that painted a clear picture of a woman who'd been planning to replace me for months, if not longer. The only question was what I was going to do about it. I was still deciding when Lena came home that evening, looking guilty and defensive in equal measure. "How are you feeling?" she asked, hovering in the bedroom doorway. "Much better," I said, looking up from my packing. Amazing what a day of rest can do. "Good, that's good." She paused. Did you stay in bed all day?" "Pretty much. Why?" "No reason. Just wondering." I smiled at her, the same smile I'd been giving her for 4 years. "Just taking it easy like you suggested. Getting my strength back for the big move." Lena nodded and walked away, but I could see the relief in her shoulders. She thought she'd gotten away with it. She had no idea that I was just getting started. Thursday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was in the kitchen, making breakfast and pretending everything was normal, when someone knocked on the front door. Not the polite knock of a neighbor or the official knock of a delivery person, the kind of aggressive, impatient knocking that meant business. Lena was in the shower, getting ready for another day of managing Troy's career and planning our future living arrangements. I opened the door to find a short, stocky man in his 50s wearing a uniform shirt with "Big Mike's Moving" embroidered on the pocket. "You Nick Patterson?" he asked, consulting a clipboard. "That's me. Got a delivery scheduled for this morning. Moving trucks downstairs. Where do you want us to start?" I stared at him. "I'm sorry. What delivery?" "Lady called yesterday, said her boyfriend needed his stuff moved in today. Gave us this address, said to ask for Nick Patterson." He looked at his clipboard again. Lena something? Said you'd be expecting us. The shower was still running. I could hear Lena singing, some pop song I didn't recognize. There's been a misunderstanding, I told Big Mike. Nobody's moving in today. Look, buddy, I got 3 guys and a truck sitting downstairs, and I got a signed work order. Lady paid cash up front. Said her place was available immediately. Her place, I repeated. Yeah, said she'd been living here for years, and her boyfriend's lease was up. Pretty standard situation. I almost laughed. Can I see that work order? Big Mike handed me the clipboard. Sure enough, there was Lena's signature at the bottom, along with a description of services. Move client's belongings from storage unit to girlfriend's apartment. Client will assume lease responsibilities immediately. Client will assume lease responsibilities. I'm going to need you to wait here for just a minute, I told Big Mike. I walked back to the bedroom and pulled the property deed out of my folder. When I returned to the front door, Big Mike was checking his watch and looking impatient. Here's the thing, I said, handing him the deed. This is my apartment, my name, my mortgage, my property. Nobody's moving in today. Big Mike looked at the deed, then at me, then back at the deed. Ah, hell, she played us. Looks that way. This happens more than you'd think, he said, shaking his head. People assume things about living situations, don't bother to check the paperwork. We're gonna have to cancel this job. What about the guy's stuff? It's in the truck. We'll have to take it back to storage until he figures out where he actually wants it delivered. The shower shut off. I could hear Lena moving around in the bathroom, probably getting ready to come out and supervise Troy's grand entrance into our domestic bliss. You want me to talk to the lady? Big Mike asked. Explain the situation? No, I said, an idea forming. Let me handle it. But do me a favor. Can you wait downstairs for about 10 minutes? I think there's going to be another conversation that needs to happen first. Big Mike grinned. Sure thing, buddy. I'll go explain to the client why his stuff ain't getting delivered today. He left, and I sat down on the couch to wait. Lena emerged from the bathroom 5 minutes later, wrapped in a towel and humming the same song she'd been singing in the shower. Who was at the door? She asked. Movers. Oh good, they're early. She stopped mid-sentence as my words sank in. Wait, what? Movers. From Big Mike's moving company. They're here to move Troy's stuff into your place. Lena went very pale. Nick, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear the explanation for how you hired movers to relocate your boyfriend into an apartment you don't own, using lease rights you don't have. This is my home too, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? I pulled out the deed and set it on the coffee table. Because according to this legal document, this apartment belongs to me, just me, purchased with my money, mortgaged in my name, titled in my name. Lena stared at the deed like it was written in a foreign language. But we've been living here together for 4 years. You've been living here, as my guest, which I was happy to accommodate as long as we were married and building a life together. But since you've decided to end our marriage and replace me with someone who's better in every way, I think it's time we clarified the actual legal situation. You can't just throw me out, Lena said, clutching her towel tighter. Actually, I can, but I'm not going to. I'm going to give you 30 days to find somewhere else to live. 30 days, Lena, not 48 hours like you gave me. I pulled out a certified envelope, the one I'd prepared the night before, and handed it to her. This is an official notice to quit. You're being evicted as an unlawful tenant. The envelope cracked as she ripped it open with shaking hands. She read the first few lines, then looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Complete shock. You can't do this. I can, and I am. You wanted me out so Troy could move in and take over the lease. But there is no lease, Lena. There's just my mortgage, my property, and my decision about who gets to live here. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know. Maybe Troy's place? Oh wait, his lease is up. How convenient. Lena sank down onto the ugly couch, my grandmother's ugly couch, still holding the eviction notice. This is insane. You're being vindictive. I'm being practical. You made it clear that you don't want to be married to me, that Troy is a better option in every conceivable way, and that this apartment should be available for your new relationship. I'm simply clarifying who actually has the legal right to make that decision. Someone knocked on the door again. This time it was the polite knock I'd been expecting. "That'll be Troy," I said, getting up to answer it. Troy was standing in the hallway looking confused and slightly irritated. He was wearing designer jeans and a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym-sculpted physique, and he was carrying a duffel bag that probably contained his toiletries and enough protein powder to feed a small army. "Hey, Nick," he said with the kind of fake friendliness that fooled absolutely no one. "Sorry to hear you're moving out. Lena said you found a great place." "Actually," I said, "there's been a change of plans. Come on in. We need to talk." Troy walked into the apartment and stopped short when he saw Lena sitting on the couch in her towel, holding legal documents and looking like she'd been hit by a truck. "Babe," he said, "what's wrong?" "Tell him," I said to Lena. She looked up at Troy with tears in her eyes. "Nick owns the apartment. He's evicting me." "What?" Troy looked back and forth between us. "That's not... You said this was your place." "It is my place," Lena said weakly. "No," I corrected. "It's my place. Lena's been living here as my wife, but since she's decided to end our marriage, she no longer has any legal right to be here." Troy set down his duffel bag slowly. "So when you said I could move in, she was offering you something that wasn't hers to give," I finished. "The movers are downstairs, by the way. They're waiting to find out where you actually want your stuff delivered, since it's not coming here." Troy's face went through several interesting color changes. "This is bullshit. You can't just kick her out because you're pissed about the divorce." "I'm not kicking her out because I'm pissed," I said calmly. "I'm evicting her because she's no longer my wife and this is my property. She has 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements." "30 days?" Troy looked at Lena. "What are we supposed to do for 30 days? "We?" I asked. "That sounds like a you problem, Troy. I'm sure a successful personal trainer with 50,000 Instagram followers can figure out a temporary housing solution." Troy's jaw worked like he was chewing something unpleasant. "You're doing this to get back at her. I'm doing this because it's my legal right as the property owner. But if it makes you feel better to think it's about revenge, go ahead." I walked over to the window and looked down at the street. Big Mike's truck was still there, and I could see Troy's belongings stacked on the sidewalk like a garage sale that nobody wanted to attend. "Your stuff's getting rained on," I observed. Troy rushed to the window and cursed when he saw his furniture and boxes sitting unprotected on the wet pavement. "I have to go deal with this," he said to Lena. "We'll figure something out." He kissed her on the forehead, a gesture that was probably meant to be reassuring but came across as patronizing, and headed for the door. "Troy," Lena called after him. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "Yeah?" "I love you." Troy looked at her for a long moment, taking in the towel, the tears, the legal documents, and the sudden reality that his girlfriend came with significantly more complications than he'd signed up for. "I love you too, babe," he said finally. "We'll figure this out." But his voice lacked conviction, and we all knew it. After he left, Lena and I sat in silence for several minutes. She was still holding the eviction notice, reading it over and over like the words might change if she stared at them long enough. "I never thought you'd do something like this," she said finally. "I never thought you'd cheat on me with your personal trainer and then try to move him into my apartment," I replied. "I guess we're both full of surprises. What do you want from me, Nick?" I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, sitting on my grandmother's couch in my apartment, asking me what I wanted from her after she'd just tried to replace me with a man who was better in every way. "I want you to find somewhere else to live," I said. You have 30 days. And for the first time since this whole mess started, I felt like I was the one in control.